Welcome to The Sideshow.
All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Sideshow. And today, Mike is going to be driving. Mike, why don't you let the crew out there know what we're going to be talking about today?
All right, thanks, Mark. Today we're going to talk about uh, uh, not necessarily one of my favorite bands, but a big band from the old days, and that is Jethro Tull, Aqualung,
Oh,
Side One.
sweet.
Um, uh, and this album came out in 1971. You and we turned 8 years old in 1971. And so, this wasn't something like, Mom, Dad, we got to go to the record store to get Jethro
A,
Tull's new
a
album.
little before our time.
Yeah, but in any case, I mean, Jethro Tull was a band, I think, in large part because of this album. Aqualung became sort of a staple band of the classic rock era, and were one of the more commercial manifestations of what's known as progressive rock. And there's a number of different bands that could or couldn't fit into that category, but it's an album that had a bunch of songs that made it onto the radio, and a lot of songs that a lot of people or people that listen to classic rock on the radio would be familiar with, or at least recognize if they heard it. The title track Aqualung, Cross-Eyed Mary, um, uh, uh, Locomotive Breath, Hem 43, and others. Uh, but and the Jethro Tull had a long career after Aqualung. Uh, uh, their first album came out in 1968. This was in 1971,
Hmm.
and they made music well into the 80s. And I don't actually know what the status of the band is right now, but I mean, in the early 80s, they were still cranking out music.
Yeah,
And while there were a lot of lineup changes, even at this early stage of their career, there'd been a number of different lineup changes
yeah,
in the band before the Aqualung album came out, and those kind of lineup changes continued into the future. But Ian Anderson, the vocalist, flautist, and sort of kind of figurehead of the band, remained in the band. And the guitar player who joined the band, I believe at the time of their second album in 1969, named Martin. It's either Barr or Barry,
hmm,
Barre is how you spell his last name. I'm not positive how to
hmm.
pronounce it correctly, but he kind of was a mainstay of the band, into the 80s and stuff like that. But uh,
Yeah,
but
it just real quickly about that. These you see this with these bands that are really trying to take on a different sound, especially incorporating the notion of some of these classical instruments or more of a folk or almost Renaissance type sound into the music. So a lot of different instruments. You're not talking about guitar, bass guitar, drums. You're talking about all these different types of cello players and flute and violin and this type of thing. Uh, those they're not growing as many people that are picturing a life on the road and performing that are playing the violin and the cello as you are people that pick up a guitar. And I think that's part of the notion of the lineup changes that this band has, and it was significant. Not just considering the fact that they were cranking out albums for decades, basically. I think from the time of Aqualung into the 80s, they were kicking out an album every single year. And they really were constantly moving through musicians. And it didn't, if you read about it, it wasn't like conflicts within the band or whatever. I mean, these musicians just didn't necessarily want to spend their lives on the road. And Jethro Tull toured a lot. So it's just kind of interesting looking at some of these non-conventional makeups of musicians in some of these bands, and you really do see that, which is also interesting because Jethro Tull had commercial success from their very first album. They got traction. I mean, they weren't big megastars on day one, but they were getting traction and commercial success. So the notion of being able to keep musicians you think would be there, I believe it's just the nature of the type of music that they were playing, and it's a little bit different than just your classic rock kind of stuff that was being played at the time.
You know, and I think I agree that they're a unique sounding band. And, a friend of mine once said, that you can identify a progressive rock band from, late 60s, early 70s if they have a woodwind instrument
Mm-hmm.
in it, I mean, and, obviously a flute is actually a woodwind instrument, I
Yeah.
believe.
Yes, it is. Yep.
And, or, like King Crimson had a saxophone player, stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that.
Yeah.
And that's not, I mean, I'm not saying that that's a universal rule, but certainly that was something that distinguished Jethro Tull amongst bands in general, and certainly amongst hard rock bands, because it certainly by the time of Aqualung, and I believe before then, I mean, there were elements of hard rock music along with kind of sort of the typical late '60s blues
Yeah.
bands that played in England at that time. Um, there was also some jazziness
Mm-hmm.
to their music, with not only because of the flute, but for some other reasons as well. Um, and also kind of like English folk music,
Yeah.
whether it's kind of a Fairport Convention sort of thing or Incredible String Band,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. There was a lot of ingredients in the stew
Yeah.
that certainly by the time of Aqualung, and I haven't spent a lot of time listening to their first two albums. Their first album came out in 1968, was called This Was,
Mm-hmm.
and I've got the Living in the Past compilation. I had that on vinyl, and I've still got the vinyl record.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got the CD, and so I've heard some of their earlier material, but I never really spent a lot of time or was able to kind of internalize their earlier albums. Their third album, which was called Benefit, was 1970. The second album before that was called Stand Up from 1969. Benefit had a song called Teacher, which got some like FM radio airplay back in the day. But it was Aqualung that sort of uh, uh, it's the record that made them ubiquitous on the radio,
Yes, absolutely.
which is kind of a term that's pretty broad, but I think sort of when a band makes it big and they become ubiquitous on the radio, at least for a period of time, that was the case with Jethro Tull as a result of Aqualung. And in the classic rock context, you get on a classic rock radio station and you're on a long trip in your car, the odds that you might hear something by Jethro Tull is it's not all that slim,
No, no.
and whatnot.
Well, the chances that you're going to hear Aqualung is pretty consistent. It's one of those songs. If you're going to put together a list of the greatest classic rock songs or whatever, it's going to make it in there. So it's not going to be in the top 10, but it's going to be on that. It's going to be on that top list. It's certainly up there in notable classic rock songs, and then this album in that as well.
Well, and on side two, there's Locomotive Breath,
Mm-hmm.
which is another one that is kind of right up there. And that one could argue that that's a better song,
Mm-hmm.
than Aqualung. And some of the other ones that made it onto the radio, one you heard Mother Goose on the radio,
Mm-hmm.
not all the time,
Yeah.
but you would hear that on the radio. Cross-eyed Mary, you'd
Mm-hmm.
hear on the radio, and Hem 43 from side two of Aqualung, you'd hear
Yeah.
that on the radio, and sometimes some of the others. And the album was described by someone that I was reading as riff heavy,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that is probably the best way to describe it. And the mingling of these different types of music, whether it's kind of bluesy stuff or jazzy stuff, or English folky stuff,
Mm-hmm.
uh, the hard rock electric guitar aspect of the music was there.
Hmm.
And I don't, I see you pulled, you pulled the cover out there. I don't have the vinyl of Aqualung anymore, and one of the reasons is because I think after the CD came out, my album cover, the inside of the gatefold, ended up getting put up in the wall on the wall in one of the apartments I lived in back in the day.
Because
So
it's good art. Good
at
art.
this
Yeah.
at this point, why don't you,
Yeah.
Mark, since you do have a copy, why don't you show
Yes.
us?
Yes. This is another great example of the amount of art and content that you could place onto a record album as opposed to a CD. And obviously, there's nothing that comes with streaming. But this is the cover to the album. It's a gatefold, and I'll show that in just a second. But you've got this kind of seedy looking character with this long coat, which was Ian Anderson would regularly, especially in the early years, play with a long coat like this in their concerts. This is the back. There's some actually pretty significant writing that's on here about kind of their thoughts about what was going on in their minds during the time of this. It is a gatefold, album. This isn't one continuous piece of art here like you'll sometimes see, but on the inside you get this picture and it's just art. I mean, there's no content here or anything like that.
Well, those are the members of the band.
Yes, yes. And obviously in this, you're looking at this kind of, medieval is not the term, it's, 18th century, London back streets or that type of thing. Just kind of maybe a different, darker kind of period that you get here. And as we talk about some of the music on this side, I mean, that certain kind of a little hauntiness is absolutely there. And I won't take the time to read it all, but there's some writing on the back of this album. Kind of. I'll just say the first clause here. There's about 9 or 10 clauses or verses that they've written here, and this one is: "In the beginning, man created God, and in the image of man created he him." So, more of, now, if you're to believe this, then it's kind of hard to line up with some of the stuff you might read in, say, the Bible. So, there were some thoughts about religion and spirituality and that type of thing that come through in some of the songs and the lyrics. But again, a lot of content, information about the band, and insights that come right with the album. Cool album, cool album cover.
Well, and the what we would now call font of the
Yeah.
writing on the back of the album cover that you pointed out there and read, along with the language itself, is certainly biblical in
Yeah, and I
nature.
don't know if I can catch the thing on that, but it's interesting. It's an interesting look. It's a great interesting to read as you're checking out the first couple tracks.
Well, and the two sides of the album have titles,
Mm-hmm.
and side one is the title of the first track and of sort of the suite of
Yeah.
songs, and it's not really a suite of songs, but is titled Aqualung.
Mm-hmm.
And then side two is titled My God.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the first song on side two is called My God, and this and
Yeah.
that. Well, I think that there may be a common theme to kind of some of the general subject matter on side one and side two surrounding those titles. The band has apparently disavowed the idea that this was a concept album.
Mm-hmm.
And and that depends, I guess, on what you mean by a concept album. I mean, the songs don't necessarily tell a story. Separate from each other. But I think that they certainly on side one there's sort of some
Threads.
common themes that run through the music. And in fact, the album after Aqualung, which was called Thick as a Brick, and that was like both sides of the album were two parts of a complete single composition.
Yeah.
And part of the reason why they did it that way was after Aqualung had been sort of tagged by some as a concept album. Apparently, Ian Anderson was like, "You want a concept album? Well, okay, we'll give you one. Just one song." And it was not as effective as
Yeah.
Aqualung commercially or with music critics. But in any case, let's start with side one of Aqualung, and the first track on side one is called Aqualung, and it's you showed the cover of the album, and there's a kind of an unsavory character, and apparently what inspired that cover art and the song was a picture that it may have been Ian Anderson's wife or companion that took it. But in any case, there was a picture of a homeless man somewhere in London that the person who took the photo and Ian Anderson looked at as fairly compelling, and the idea that Ian Anderson had was he looked at it and it was sort of like, well, look, this is a figure who is deserving of some compassion. Someone who's forced to live on the streets and this and that. But at the same time, there was also a reaction, a certain amount of distaste, if not fear. Like, as you say, kind of an unsavory looking person, not the sort of person you necessarily want to take into your home, or have move in next door. Mm. And the song, which will, the specifics of which we'll get to in a second here, kind of reflects those two different reactions.
Yes.
To such a person, and the style of music from the beginning of the song into the middle and towards the end, there are a number of different styles that to some extent kind of reflect that sort of those different reactions to this single person that they see.
Mm-hmm. It's really those changes are very different styles in the music. I mean, there's really kind of short bursts in this song, and it's clearly to elicit certain emotions or visions or even roughness of viewing this person. And I think that even going a little bit farther, what you were talking about being different reactions that people have to this type of person that they might see on the street, I think it is also the idea that, look, it can be true that this person is very nasty looking and rough looking and potentially even dangerous. And it's also true that you need to have some empathy. There's some loneliness in this person. There's some, difficulty in their past. It's really an interesting song, the way that it goes in, because one minute you're listening to something that is, and that it's really kind of rough the way that these descriptions go in, and 20 seconds later you're listening to something that is much more compellingly empathetic and softer in sound. They do a very good job of moving back and forth in this.
Well, and the song starts out with a very memorable 6-note guitar riff. Yes. And why don't we put a little clip in, and then we can kind of continue on the other side.
Perfect.
Sitting on the park bench, eyeing little girls with bad intent. Snot's running down his nose, greasy fingers smearing shabby
All right. Well, you could hear that opening riff, and then and that's something that it's hard to forget that riff
Yeah.
once you've heard it. And there's not necessarily anything special about it or particularly melodic or anything, but it just it dun, 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 dun,
Yeah.
it just kind of it kind of takes a hold of you. And
Well, and
then
it's one of those. I would put it as one of those really great guitar riffs. They nailed not only being just a heavy, straightforward kind of rock and roll guitar piece, but the really memorable ones. There's just a way that it catches kind of an emotion, and obviously Led Zeppelin was very good at creating guitar riffs like this, but this one is up there as far as if anybody that's listened to any classic rock has heard will recognize that guitar riff. It's a good one.
well, and Jethro Tull was a very different band from Led Zeppelin.
Oh, absolutely,
On a number of different levels. However, a lot of this, at least in the United States, a lot of the same kind of people at that time who liked Led Zeppelin liked Jethro Tull.
Yeah.
And part of the reason was because they had achieved a style of music that didn't get too far away from that hard rock, electric guitar based music. And after that opening riff, the music kind of slides into a more dirgy, sort of sludgy, almost like a leaner sort of Black Sabbath type sound.
Yeah.
And the lyrics are describing the homeless man in relatively harsh terms.
Yes.
Sitting on the park bench, eyeing little girls with bad intent.
Yeah.
That's dirty old man sitting, kind of a menace,
checking out your baby daughter.
Drying in the cold sun, watching as the frilly panties run, spitting out pieces of his broken luck.
And of course, snot is running down his nose. Just
greasy fingers smearing shabby clothes.
Yeah,
he's snot's running down his nose and he's wiping it out with his hand and then wiping his hand on his clothes.
Yep.
So doesn't present him in all that favorable of a light. But then fairly quickly, the music kind of comes down and softens a little bit, and I think we've got a little clip that will sort of sum that up.
Yes, we do.
All right. Well, that's a little bit different. Just a very acoustic, kind of like that English folk. Sun streaking cold, an old man wandering lonely, taking time the only way he knows. It sort of steps back and is looking at the same person from an entirely different perspective. Leg hurting bad, he bends to pick a dog end, which is a cigarette butt, is what that refers to. And that's what used to be a thing. With homeless people, they would go out and they would collect cigarette butts, and then they'd take the ends and sort of they'd have their own little pile of tobacco out of it, and goes down to the bog and warms his feet. So totally different approach. And mentions the armies up the road, Salvation a la mode, and a cup of tea. I mean, it's referring to the Salvation Army, in my opinion. I mean, I think it's pretty clear. Now, one thing to address is, why is this guy being referred to as Aqualung? I think the answer to that is not particularly controversial, but it's because he's got a hacking cough. He's got respiratory problems. It's sort of like pneumonia. When you get pneumonia, your alveoli and your lungs fill up with fluid, and so it's that's I believe the significance of Aqualung, because most people, when they think of an Aqualung, they think of like Jacques Cousteau,
Yeah.
and deep scuba divers, and some guy in a park in London, picking up cigarette butts. It's
Yeah.
not that.
And you can, the kind of a common physical characteristic of, a homeless person like this. They talk in this song about enduring the winter, and do you still remember December's foggy freeze, when that ice clings onto your beard? Was screaming agony. It's just kind of like it's brutal getting through these winters, man. And then smoking, kind of whatever you can get your hand on, and after years or decades of that, a lot of coughing, right? And probably some very notable coughing of any time coming in the direction of this guy. So I'd have to agree with you on the Aqualung.
And you snatch your rattling last breaths with deep sea diver sounds.
Mm-hmm.
And that part of the song is that kind of moves into the third sort of part of the song, because you've got the sort of hard rock sludgy guitar beginning. Then things soften up and get quieter with the acoustic guitar. And then right at the lyrical point that you referred to, that, do you still remember the December's foggy freeze? The song picks up. And
Yeah.
why don't we do a little clip of that?
Sure.
Do you still remember the December's foggy freeze? When the ice that clings onto your beard was screaming agony. Hey, and you snatch your rattling last breaths with deep sea diver sounds, and the flowers bloom like madness in the spring.
All right, so now we're in a different part of the song, and it kind of picks up and starts to get some momentum going, and the same verse that was sang earlier during the slower acoustic quiet part, the old man wandering lonely, taking time the only way he knows, is repeated in this faster context. Now, does that necessarily mean anything? I don't know, probably not. But the song is picking up, and so you've kind of gone through three different motifs, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
at this point in the song, and kind of the next transition really is sort of the lead guitar break in the middle. That's got a whole different style than the beginning of the song. And why don't we have our maybe this would be the last clip from this song, but let's take a clip of the lead guitar break.
Shout away uneasy. You poor old sod, you see it turn to me.
All right, and so the middle of the song is comprised of this guitar solo, a part of which we just heard, and it's so, and that sort of culminates kind of the middle part and of the third motif that I think was the word I used a few minutes ago, uh, and then the song kind of comes back into the acoustic, slower part, with a dee 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 dee, and there's really a fairly short um uh 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 verse, and the song basically concludes with the beginning again, that 6 note opening guitar riff, and the sludgy hard rock, sitting on a park bench, and which basically brings the song to an end. And it's a longer song. I think it's about 6.5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Long enough, short enough to be on the radio, but relatively long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 6.5 minutes.
And kind of concludes the song with the same sentiment, the snot running down his nose, eyeing little girls take on things.
Mm-hmm.
And and I don't know what the significance of that is, but I assume it's sort of like, look, the beginning and the end is what you ultimately are going to see, and you sort of have to dig in deeper if you're going to be able to, take a compassionate take on a character such as Aqualung, when you see him sitting on the bench. And so it's and I'm making it sound a bit more profound than I think it really is, because basically we've got a rock and roll song that was being played on the radio to people who weren't necessarily looking for profundity,
Yeah.
who wanted to rock.
Yeah.
And
We just want to rock.
but but it serves both purposes.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's it's a substantial song musically, and the themes that are being addressed in the lyrics, I think, are important. And nowadays, homelessness is is, if anything, a bigger issue. I don't know what's happening in London, but certainly in the United States, it's a much bigger issue than it was. And there are a lot of people who look at others, with, on the one hand, a sense of compassion, but another with, but I don't know if I'm not so compassionate, I want to take him into my house.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. A difficult question being tackled here, and I'm sure that original piece of art that was the inspiration, you could see all these complexities in it, which is what caught his attention in the first place. And you get thinking about it, and there's plenty of content for a song, rock and roll or not. And obviously this one was a pretty big classic in the classic rock songs that are out there.
Probably it's Jethro Tull's most recognizable song. That opening guitar riff. It's hard to kind of forget that. And a very commercially successful song to lead off what was their most commercially successful album.
Yep.
Moving on, the second track is called "Cross-Eyed Mary," and it is definitely a riff heavy
Yes.
song, and that this was one that was played on the radio. On FM, AOR stations. This was something that, like when we were in high school, you would hear this on the radio every now and again. And a more straightforward song than Aqualung, although it actually mentions that the term Aqualung appears in the lyrics of this song.
Mm-hmm.
And Cross-Eyed Mary, Mary in this song is a teenage prostitute, like a schoolgirl prostitute is basically who it is. Another unsavory character, forced through some circumstance to sort of live beneath or on the fringes of normal society, and there isn't the same sort of mixture of compassion and distaste as there is in Aqualung in the first song. But laughing in the playground gets no kicks from little boys, would rather make it with a leching gray. Or maybe her attention is drawn by Aqualung, who watches through the railings as they play.
So he's outside the fence of the schoolyard, peering in on the children.
Yeah, so Mary is one of the little girls that Aqualung is eyeing with bad intent, and she's up for it.
Yeah.
And now I would say that Mary is a physically mature teenage girl, as opposed to a little girl. I don't think is the appropriate label for the character in the song. And you look at the lyrics. The first verse doesn't necessarily get at Mary, the character. Who would be a poor man, a beggar man, a thief, if he had a rich man in his hand? And who would steal the candy from a laughing baby's mouth if he could take it from the money man? And it's kind of, look, there's people with means and there's people without, and sort of the poor people won't steal from each other if they can steal from the rich man. And there's actually a reference to Robin Hood later in the song. She's the Robin Hood of Highgate, helps the poor man get along. And I think what that means is that she makes her services available for a small fee to men who have money. And there's references to Hampstead Village and Highgate in the song, which are neighborhoods in London, which are relatively well-to-do.
Yeah.
Kind of trendy, well-to-do neighborhoods where they don't,
the rich
they don't
side
want,
of the tracks.
Yeah, they don't want Aqualung hanging around.
Yeah.
In those areas. But this is one, maybe this is the another song along with Aqualung, and I think they're the only two songs on this side that have an actual lead guitar break. And to kind of get a taste of Cross-Eyed Mary, why don't we put a little clip in? There's there you kind of get that's Cross-Eyed Mary in a nutshell. I mean, at the very beginning of the song, there's sort of an intro that is flute based.
Also very memorable. That kind of fluttering of the flute. It's almost a woodwind riff that leads you into the into the song. Very distinctive. I think would also be memorable to someone who's listened to a lot of classic rock.
But the rest of the song is basically consistent with that clip, which
Yeah.
included the flute and then electric guitar solo, and this song, I think, if anything, fits in more neatly with sort of conventional classic rock
Absolutely.
sensibilities
Yeah.
than Aqualung does. And when I first heard that song, I thought this is cool. I like this, and
Yeah.
it was probably the first time I ever thought I'd like to check out Jethro Tull.
Hmm.
Was from this song, and again, riff heavy. Dun 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 dun
Hmm.
dun. Dun. I
Yep.
mean, it had a very a memorable riff that kind of took hold of you.
Yeah.
Uh, and for someone who is interested in something that is hard rock in nature, but a little off the beaten path, I think this is a good example of that kind of song. It didn't
Yeah.
require you being that adventurous necessarily,
Hmm.
but very successful. And you know the lyrical content is relatively uh, uh, consistent with that in the first song, Aqualung. I don't know if he really sustains that through the side, but certainly the first two songs are talking about characters where maybe the world would be a better place if they didn't exist, but the world is what it is, and they do.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And that, I would agree that this song is a little more just, yeah. Here's some classic rock that you're going to listen to. Aqualung, which was bookended with some, again, very memorable and classic rock type style, has some changes in there that moves you around a little bit from a style perspective. You've got to be ready for a couple changes in Aqualung. Not so much here with Cross-Eyed Mary. It kind of keeps hitting you with this, and you can almost there is almost a kind of just continued pounding in the song that comes at you as you're listening to it. You're not going to nod off listening to Cross-Eyed Mary. That's for sure.
Yeah. Um, so it's so and like I say, I mean it's probably the song that I heard on the radio that made me think that delving, buying an album by Jethro Tull was worthwhile, and not just like a greatest hits album
Hmm.
either. But so the second song on the side is Cross-Eyed Mary. The third song is a very short acoustic piece that is it's very simple, and it's the song is like a minute and 20 seconds long. It's very short, and lyrically it's very sparse. And I don't want to play a clip from it. I mean, you could probably play
Yeah.
on this podcast. We could probably play the whole song,
Yeah.
and I mean, if people are curious, they can certainly
It's
listen to
brief.
it. It's called "Cheap Day Return." And what the title refers to is, for those of us who have been fortunate enough to visit Europe, the trains are one of the major forms of transportation that the average person uses to get from place to place. And like a round trip ticket that was good only for the one day was a reduced fare, and I believe that's what the cheap day return is referring to. And it basically just describes a man standing on a platform at a train station, and is wondering whether the nurse is treating your father the way she should. And apparently, when Ian Anderson went to visit his father at a nursing home, the nurse asked for his autograph,
Mhm.
and that's it. I mean,
Yep.
that's it. He's just that's what the song is about. I mean,
Kind of
it's
struck him. Yeah.
and so it's sort of like a little sketch.
Hmm.
It's not a conventional song with verses and choruses. There's no instrumental break. It's all just acoustic guitar and Ian Anderson singing. If there's any other instrumentation, it's very restrained and in the background that you'd have to sort of search around to pick out. But it's a very pleasant song, and it's sort of like a break. You get this 6-minute multi-part hard rock song about a child molester to start out. Then you've got this sort of deeper, riffier Cross-Eyed Mary, and here it's just sort of, okay, let's just step back. Yeah. And I'm not saying that this was thrown in as sorbet or anything like that, but it's definitely it's a much different song in form and style and content than either of the first two.
And I also think it's a downshift from the first two songs into what the rest of the side is going to be. And a lot of times, as you know, if you've ever actually downshifted a stick shift, sometimes it drags you down more than what you're eventually going to end up at, right? And this song there's a tone of a lot of these types of songs on Jethro Tull. This is where this English folk kind of song really comes out. There's kind of almost like a medieval or Renaissance type sound to this song. Completely acoustic guitar with some violin that comes in there. No keyboards, no drums, anything. It just and it really does. It settles you down, because we are going to hear the remainder of this side. We don't go back to the heavy rock at all for the remainder of this side. In fact, we really don't go into any heavy drums after this or anything like that. But it's a downshift and a very, very pleasant. It is kind of short, not a lot to it, but it's a really pleasant kind of neat song. And after you've had snot running down your nose thrown at you for a few songs, it's a nice little break.
Yeah. And apparently, like I say, I haven't taken the time to really delve into and immerse myself in Jethro Tull's earlier albums. But apparently there was more acoustic music on this album than Jethro Tull's fans had been accustomed to based on the first three. But so Cheap Day Return, it's very short and a very pleasant song. Mm-hmm. The fourth track is called Mother Goose, and it's got more substance to it. It's got a fairly memorable flute riff in it, but it's not a riffy like Aqualung or Cross-Eyed Mary is. It's a much different, more English folk than hard rock.
Much more acoustic feel. And even the drums on this, that you hear, just it's almost like a hand type drum that is playing to give a little beat in the background. You're not hearing drum fills and snare and that kind of thing. It's smooth, a very smooth acoustic kind of sound to it.
Why don't we do a clip of that of Mother Goose, just so everyone can get a sense of what we're talking about.
Sure.
As I did walk by Hampstead Fair, I came upon Mother Goose, so I turned her loose as she was screaming. And a foreign student said to me, was it really true? There are elephants and lions too in Piccadilly Circus. Walked down by the baby home to try and catch some sun. Saw at least 100 schoolgirls sobbing into handkerchiefs as one. I'd was a schoolboy.
All right. Well, I mean, and there you have it. It's a very unthreatening, kind of pleasant, a more substance to the music than the previous track, Cheap Day Return, and the singer is singing, "As I did walk by Hampstead Fair, I came upon Mother Goose, so I turned her loose, but she was screaming." And I guess I haven't taken a lot of time to ponder what the screaming meant, but the Hampstead Fair is, and we mentioned, the neighborhoods of like Hampstead and Highgate in London, but well, apparently the Hampstead Fair is an event that occurs annually in London in the Hampstead neighborhood. And, later in the song, the singer refers to himself as a schoolboy. And, whether he's like a Tom Sawyer who's taking, playing hooky from school and going and checking out the fair, or he just some other type of young man who's going and wandering about this fair and looking at what's happening, and not so much like a fairy tale, Mother Goose, but sort of a daydream, I think is what the song is about. And so there's not really any message here. It's more of a convention. It's a conventional song. It's not just a sketch like Cheap Day Return was. But I don't think there's anything particularly profound about this song. It's just a guy who's looking at the things he sees at the fair and just sort of musing about it, daydreaming about it, getting away from his troubles or getting away from his obligations, as it may be, and just kind of a pleasant, folky romp through a daydream afternoon. That's how I see it.
I'd agree.
And another one that, when I think of this song, I mean, I think that this is a characteristically Jethro Tull piece. Because it presents the flute in a context that people who like Jethro Tull's hard rock music will be able to appreciate, but at the same time it's not a hard rock song. There just isn't that sort of electric guitar feel to it, like the first two songs. But it's a song where if someone who was familiar with Jethro Tull to any real extent, but hadn't heard this song and heard this song on the radio, you could tell it was Jethro Tull.
Oh, absolutely, and it's that English folk style with the flute that comes in with these rhythms in the song. It flows in a way that a lot of Jethro Tull music does, and it is this one being a little bit more on the calmer, smoother, quieter side as opposed to some of the heavier tunes. But again, we've downshifted from the beginning of the side and kind of moving into something that's just a little more calming, a little more relaxing to listen to.
No. It's also true of the fourth song, the next song, which is called "Wond'ring Aloud," and this is a little bit more. The structure isn't that different from "Cheap Day Return."
Yeah,
it doesn't have the typical verse chorus structure of the lyrics. It's relatively short. It's under 2 minutes in length. Very acoustic, and this one, I think we could do a little clip of to kind of give everyone a sense of the song.
Wond'ring aloud how we feel today. Last night said the sunset, my hand in her hair. We are our own saviors as we start both our hearts beating life into each other.
It's a pleasant song. The the singer is wondering how things are going to be. He and his companion, the woman he lives with, and they're making breakfast in their flat, and he concludes the song by saying, "And it's only the giving that makes you what you are." So just a much more upbeat, kind of positive feel to the song than even "Cheap Day Return," which is just so pleasant in tone.
It's I read somewhere that "Cheap Day Return" again was kind of kind of this quick, short type feel to it, and but it was when he was going to visit his father, and in the home or the hospital or whatever, not a real upbeat type thing. And that he actually wrote this song immediately after that is more of something to cheer him up. So you've got this one kind of in the same mode mentally, and the songs do have a very similar kind of feel to it. There's just something a little bit more upbeat.
Well, that's a very good. I mean, I was not aware of that, or I hadn't read what you just described there. And it makes a lot of sense. Just sort of okay, there's good stuff happening, and sort of a positive attitude or seeing a half full glass is worthy. And not to mention that it's only the giving that makes you what you are. Suggesting a more charitable approach. Yes. As opposed to the judgmental approach, has value.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's taking us up to the end of the side. The fifth and final track on side one is called "Up to Me," and this brings this isn't necessarily like Aqualung or Cross-Eyed Mary, but it does get back to a more riff-heavy structure, and there is some electric guitar in this song, and so it's got a little more of a sinister air to it, mm-hmm. And I think is sort of more consistent with the whole riff-heavy nature of the album as a whole. And before we talk about this, the song is called "Up to Me," and why don't we just listen to a little bit of the beginning to give us a sense of what we're talking about here.
All right, let's do it.
And leave you in a wimpy bar. You tell me that we've gone too far. Come running up to me. Make the scene at Cousin Jack's. Leave him to put the bottles back. Mends his glasses that are cracked. Well, that's one up to me. Hey.
All right, and this song, it's lyrically, I mean, I think it's about working class people going out at night and sort of asserting themselves in the world, and it's up to me. At one point, the singer says, "Well, I'm a common working man with a half a bitter bread and jam, and if it pleases me, I'll put one on you, man, when the cupper fades away. Now, I mean, that's kind of like, hey, look, the sort of attitude where, someone's, rough and tumble working class guys are at the bar, and, someone next to them, and, hey, what are you looking at? You got a
Yeah.
problem? That kind of thing. Not necessarily in an aggressive, I'm looking for trouble way, but
Yeah.
it's sort of like, I may not be looking for trouble, but I'm not going to chase it away if it finds me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's up to me.
Well, and this song, right from when it starts, as I said, we'd kind of downshifted a little bit to, kind of a more relaxing, I guess, kind of mode with the last couple songs. And then we get to this one. And I mean, immediately there is this feeling of crammed. I mean, chaotic. I mean, in kind of a very busy pub or something like that, you can really, that's just kind of the feeling. If you were laying back listening to headphones to this side, you could start to really feel yourself relaxing with the last couple songs, and your eyes would probably open up when this song started, because there's just this kind of a chaotic, bustly kind of feel to it that isn't as comfortable, I guess, is what I would say, what we've been hearing to over the last couple songs.
Well, and you've got the flute, and the bass and the drums and in the riff.
Yeah.
Dun, 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 dun,
Yeah.
dun, 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 dun,
Yeah.
dun, 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 dun,
Mm-hmm.
dun. But then at points you can hear it, kind of the electric guitar kind of in the background, not really part of the riff,
Yeah.
but just sort of putting kind of a little edginess
Yep.
into this. That's it's not the sort of hard rock type riff as in the first two songs, Aqualung and Cross-Eyed Mary,
Yeah.
but it's definitely the sort of middle of the side break, calmer, quieter, softer, more comfortable,
Yeah.
does give way to something that's a little more in your face. And
And they also retain that kind of uncomfortable kind of feeling. There's a lot of kind of like stop and starts to it, or almost like halting. You feel like you're flowing, and then you stop, and you kind of restart and move. And there's, again, it's kind of an edgy kind of feel to the song. Definitely a different feel that they're bringing out.
yeah, and there's no lead guitar break in this song, although I mean there is electric guitar that you can hear in the
Yeah.
song that's different from the three middle tracks on the side. But it closes out the side in a way that's really, it's kind of different from both the two hard rock songs at the beginning and
Yeah.
the quieter songs in the middle. And also it's one, and this isn't one that you hear as often on the radio,
Yeah.
but I mean, this song has been on the radio, and
Yeah.
if again, it's one of those songs where if you're familiar with Jethro Tull, really in any substantial way, or in any you'll recognize this as Jethro
Yeah.
Tull. It's
Yeah.
very recognizable. The riff, the flute, and then when the vocals come in, and and that may be one of the reasons why Jethro Tull was able to kind of get a foothold in sort of the commercial hard rock realm, was because the songs had these memorable riffs that sort of tattooed themselves onto your your sonic consciousness, and also that it was sort of a unique, very characteristic sound that I think really became fully formed at the time of Aqualung, and never really went away.
Yeah, it didn't, and they did try. You talked a lot about, not a lot about, but mentioned the fact that they went on for a long time with a lot of albums, and you kind of lost track of where they went. They had some different incarnations in like the '80s where they tried to be more what I will call classic hard rock, or standard hard rock types. They never really got the traction. This sound that was Jethro Tull was what made them memorable. And as when they stayed with a little air of this kind of English folk in their, in what was coming out of the songs, that's when they really nailed it. It's not that they weren't hard, because I brought up the notion of Led Zeppelin riffs, but you pointed out, really some of these things were a little bit more Black Sabbath than because there was a smoothness to Led Zeppelin that they like to stay away from in some of the Jethro Tull songs, and there was some very heavy stuff that was there. Yet they had a way of bringing in just this different sound, and it worked for them. And a lot of people liked it, myself included.
Yeah, and so in any case, Jethro Tull, Aqualung, I think a very significant album in the history of classic
Absolutely.
rock, and one of the more commercialized. Commercialized is not the right word, but one of the more commercially successful sort of progressive rock bands, and but different from bands like Yes, different than bands like King Crimson or whatnot. But a band that made its mark in classic rock, probably more so than most other bands that could be characterized as progressive rock. And I think that Jethro Tull was the commercial. Definitely the commercial high point, and certainly a musical high point in the history of that band.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, very interesting band. A great album, and a great side, and a great conversation, Mike.
Definitely. All right. Well, we will talk to you, Mark, next time.